Chapter 17. You wanted to see me? Shara asked as she closed the office door behind her, her voice steady despite the flicker of unease beneath it. Marius stood in front of the large windows overlooking the great hallway, his back to her as he watched the guard below. The golden light from the chandeliers cast long shadows across his figure. He turned at the sound of her voice. Shara, my dear. He walked toward her, arms open. Shara hesitated for a breath, then crossed the space between them and let herself be enveloped in his embrace. The tension in her chest loosened, but not completely. It had been so long since she'd seen him, so long since she'd felt like there was someone she could trust. "And how are you?" Marius finally asked, holding her face in his hands and kissing her forehead. She studied him more closely. Though it had been over 5 years, nothing to vampires biologically, he looked worn. His hair had bleached completely, the silver strands catching the low light. There were new lines around his mouth and eyes, the creases etched deeper when he smiled. His once vivid blue eyes were dimmer, tired. But beneath that exhaustion, the spark remained. The unmistakable vampire gleam, the intense awareness of sensations and feelings. That core strength was still there, even if time had chipped at its edges. She pulled back and they sat on the couch watching each other in silence. Despite the signs of age, Marius still radiated strength and confidence. Whatever had aged him, it hadn't broken him. That was reassuring. "I heard you've been fooling around with a human lately," Marius said, cutting through the silence. Shara smiled faintly. "I'm a soldier. I follow orders." "You're a hunter, and too good to waste your time on this nonsense." "You can take it up with Craven," she said lightly, "but I'd rather you didn't. I don't need him thinking I ran to Daddy to put in a word for me." "Daddy?" Marius looked mock-offended. "You wound me. I may be older than half the nest put together, but I could still be your lover." "I don't doubt that," Shira's smile widened. He always knew how to lift her mood. "Even so, I'd rather keep things as they are," she added. "No sense stirring things up before the meeting. Besides, we don't need a rogue cop meddling in our business right now." Marius's gaze sharpened. "Yes, you might be right." He studied her carefully. "And, apart from this inconvenience, is everything all right?" Shara turned toward the window. Below, the guard moved through the great hall, preparing for the meeting. The murmur of voices and occasional laughter rose faintly. A group of younger vampires stood near the entrance, laughing, their eyes flashing with the predatory edge of youth. Yes, all is well. Silence settled between them. Marius watched her with concern as she gazed down the great hall, where the sounds of laughter and cries from below echoed faintly. Something had shifted in her demeanor. She seemed distant, troubled, and in her eyes, he caught traces of that look, the one he had tried so hard to make her forget. The same haunted expression she wore when Daniel finally found her after months of searching and brought her to him. He wondered what had stirred it back to the surface. She had never spoken about why she joined them, though he had always known the reason. He just pretended not to, for her sake and her mother's. But maybe it was time to stop pretending, especially if the rumors he'd been hearing lately held any truth. "Marius, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Is it possible to wake a vampire before his time?" Marius's brows pulled together. "You mean to wake him from sleep, or—" "I mean hastening a transformation." Marius hesitated. "It hasn't been tried for thousands of years." "But can it be done?" Her gaze sharpened, her tone unnervingly steady. "There were attempts in the old world," Marius said slowly. "All but one failed. The transformed ones went mad and had to be destroyed. All except Torak, that is. It's said he was turned early by his mate and managed to survive the critical period." "And what happened to him?" "No one knows. Most believe Torak is a legend." He studied her. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious." You know that trying to transform before time is forbidden, right? Shira's head tilted. Forbidden? Why forbid something that isn't possible? Because some believed they could repeat Torak's success. The experiments failed. One of them became infamous. Dracula. Marius smiled faintly, but there was a tightness in his jaw, a flicker of something darker in his eyes. By the time we learned about him, he'd already spread fear across Transylvania and beyond. We had to eliminate him, not just him, really, but the legend. Did you have anything to do with that? My dear, I wasn't always an old man. I was a hunter, too. But still, Shira. Marius's tone sharpened. Forced transformation is forbidden. Why this sudden interest? I told you I was curious. She stood and crossed the room, trailing her hand along the edge of Craven's desk. Papers lay scattered across it. Next to the laptop sat an ink pot with a feather resting inside. Shara picked it up, running her fingers over the soft plume. And you? She asked. You haven't told me how you've been. The council keeps me busy. Shira smiled faintly. Marius would never discuss council business with her, just as she had kept her suspicions about Craven to herself. She set down the feather, the tip smudging a file with blue ink. She wiped the stain from her finger with a loose paper. I should go. Shira. She stopped at the door. If you were planning something, Marius said, would you tell me? She didn't turn. Probably not. Silence stretched between them. Marius watched her hand resting on the door handle. Good night, he said at last. If you're planning to sleep. Good night, she slipped out. He didn't like what he saw in her. Something was clearly bothering her, and it unsettled him. If the rumors were true, she would need every ounce of self-control she could gather. Maybe he should contact Selena. Shira would need her mother's support in this situation. But before involving Selene, he should probably reach out to Daniel. If anyone knew what was going on with her, it would be Daniel. Antonio! A young vampire stepped into the office, his blonde hair spilling over his shoulders and partly veiling his blue eyes. Marius liked the young man, rebellious as he was, because he reminded him of himself just after his transformation, still intoxicated by the rush of new sensations. I have to go out, Marius said. No one needs to know. Antonio grinned. Lord Marius is tired from the trip and needs his rest. No one disturbs him. Not even the great Triumvir's envoy. Antonio's grin widened. Not even the great Triumvir himself. Marius smiled. He wrapped his coat around his shoulders and stepped into the hall. Antonio would make sure no one followed. Not even the great Triumvir's envoy. As for the Triumvir himself, he wasn't so sure. Luckily, there was no risk of him showing up while he was away.